On the 24th of November 1971, the night before America's Thanksgiving, a middle-aged man, probably in his mid to late 40s, approached the counter at Northwest Orient Airlines at Portland International Airport. Sorry, it's very late. He had a black case and identified himself as Dan Cooper. Dan, or DB Cooper, as he's become known, bought a ticket on Flight 305 on a 30-minute trip north to Seattle. Dan boarded this Boeing 727 and is said to have sat in one of these seats, either 18, C, E, or D. Don't know why it's written like that. Screwed up. All in the back end of the passenger's cabin. Cooper was a quiet man in a business suit, along with the white shirt and black tie. He ordered bourbon and soda and waited for departure. So 305 was full. Not full, a third full. Like I said, it's late. It had 42 people on board. This included Cooper. There were 36 passengers, 6 crew, and departed perfectly on time at 2:50. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper hands a note to one of the flight attendants, Florence Schaffner. Schaffner assumed this was Dan's phone number and ignored it. A minute or so later, Cooper leaned in to whisper, "Miss, you better take a look at that note. I have a bomb." So, the note was written in this felt tip, all in caps. No one knows exactly what it says, apart from Cooper, who reclaimed the note. But Schaffner said that it said that the suitcase had a bomb in it. She had to sit next to him. So she obliged, and then asked to see the bomb. He returned the courtesy. I opened his case, and inside of it there were 8 red tubes stacked in 2 rows of 4, with red wiring coming out of the tubes and into the cylindrical battery used to power it. He closes the case and makes his demands. He wants $200,000 in negotiable American currency. He wants 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and a fuel truck standing by to refuel the plane in Seattle. Schaffner relayed this to the pilots and then returned to Cooper, who had now put on some dark sunglasses. It's not really relevant, it's just personnel profile, you know. Where am I? Northwest Orient's president okayed the payment as the authorities were being informed. The passengers were being told of a delay due to an issue with the aircraft, and the plane circled the area for 2 hours before the FBI and Seattle police had gathered the ransom money. They had it waiting for him to arrive, basically. The FBI gathered the money from local banks getting $10,000 $20 bills, most starting with the L on the issue serial number. This indicated that the money had been released from San Francisco's Federal Reserve. That's a mouthful. They also made a microfilm copy of all of the notes in case any of them popped up in circulation again. Cooper was offered a military parachutes, which he rejected, opting for the civvy chutes. The police got these from a skydiving school. At 5:39, Cooper was told his demands had been met and were waiting for him at Tacoma National Airport. I can't remember. Anyway, Cooper had the passengers close all the blinds on the plane so the snipers couldn't shoot him through the windows. He made the captain taxi the plane to a brightly lit area so no one could sneak up on the plane. Another attendant, Tyne Mucklow, said that Cooper had seemed to know the area, saying that he looked out the window and correctly stated that it looks like Tacoma down there. He also mentioned that McCord Air Base was about a 20-minute drive from Seattle to Tacoma. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, sure, why not? Anyway, she described Cooper as a calm, polite and well-spoken man. He wasn't nervous, not the usual for air piracy at the time. I'm not sure how popular air piracy at the time was, but he was rather nice. He was never cruel or nasty. He was thoughtful and calm all the time. He ordered a second drink and paid his tab. He paid his tab, that's brilliant. He tried to give Mark Lowe the change for the drink as a tip. He even offered to order food for the crew and passengers at the Seattle stop. So he's obviously not a horrible person. Anyway, they've landed in the area and are waiting for Northwest Orient Airlines Seattle operations manager Al Lee. He's wearing civilian clothes so as not to be confused with police. He then delivered the money in a knapsack. It's a bag, for those of you that don't know. The 4 parachutes were also there. Cooper sent Mark Lowe to the door at the aft stairs. Cooper then told the crew his plan was for them to head towards Mexico City as slow as they could without stalling. So probably an airspeed of about 100 knots, 150 mile an hour, about 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters. He specified that the landing gear had to be down, the flaps lowered at a 15-degree angle, and the cabin remain unpressurized. This meant they would have to stop in Reno to refuel due to the unusual configuration. But Cooper agreed that that was okay. The airline argued that it was unsafe for him to take off with the rear exit door open and the staircase lowered, so he kept it closed until they were in the air, which seems so much safer. At 7:40 p.m. the plane took off again, this time with only the pilot and co-pilot, flight attendant Mark Lowe, and flight engineer Harold Anderson, along with Cooper. Shortly after the takeoff, the flight was being shadowed out of sight by 2 F-106 fighters, one above and one below the plane, along with a Lockheed T-33 on mission for the National Guard, but the T-33 was low on fuel, so I had to turn back. That was around the sort of California-Oregon state line. There were 5 planes involved in escorting the hijacked flight. After takeoff, the crew were all told to stay in the cabin. They obeyed. However, Mark Lowe had seen Cooper tying something around his waist before she shut the door. At around 8 p.m, the warning light came on for the aft staircase. This was followed by the crew asking over the intercom if Cooper needed help. He refused politely. The crew then noticed the change in pressure, indicating that the door had been opened. Around 8:13, the plane's rear end had gone up in the air, and they needed to correct the level. At 10:15, the air stair was lowered when the pilot landed the plane at Reno. At 10:15, the air stair was still lowered when the pilot landed at Reno. The plane was surrounded by sheriff's deputies, state troopers, Reno PD, and FBI agents. If Cooper had still been on board, that would have been great. But Cooper had jumped off the aircraft. What happened to him next is the mystery here. He was never caught, never spent any of the money. As far as we know, he was never seen again. The FBI never identified him anyway. Like, not just, this is D.B. Cooper, we've seen him. There was none of that. There was no, this is who he was in his real life. They couldn't find any trace of him. His case remained open for years. It was actually closed in 2006, so not that long ago. There was basically no evidence until 1980. So yeah, 9 years after his jump, some of the money turned up. But in all honesty, that just raised more questions than answers. A bundle of notes was found on the banks of the Columbia River. A river dredging had been taking place by the Army Corps around 74 when this happened. and the consultants believed that the money had washed up on the bank and been buried in all the silt caused by this. This shows that the money had arrived long after the dredging. I'm not sure what shows, but apparently this does. Okay. It was argued that after less than a year, the clay layer was actually natural and not the result of the dredge, and it was supported by the way the notes had degraded in a rounded fashion rather than just down. The rubber bands were actually still intact. If they'd been exposed for as long a period as they'd been thought to be, they would have broken. Everyone knows what rubber bands are like. The area also supported evidence that if Cooper had landed, he'd landed in the area of the Washougal River. I think that's right. I'm just going to say Washougal. It's a funny word. Connects to the Columbia River, which is where they thought he'd been because they found the money there. The area is heavily forested, so it's possible that either his chute never opened and he fell into the area, or his chute did open, he got snagged on the tree and died there, or his chute didn't open and tree. Not a nice way to go, but you know. After a while of being stuck up in the tree, the bag deteriorates, the money drops out, ends up in the river, floats down, gets caught up in the silt. So there's another theory that his chute did open in the 170-mile-an-hour winds he was jumping into in the dead of night. This is what caused the impalement on the tree, but it just, if he was going to jump out of the plane in the dead of night in a 170-mile-an-hour wind, you'd think he'd know what he was doing and avoid the forest, but obviously the wind and all that, he'd have to be quite experienced. If he did end up in this tree, why were there only 3 bundles of cash found? One bundle that was found actually had a few notes missing from it, and it's believed that he paid off a local to keep quiet about giving him a lift, and that gave him some money, and then threw these 3 stacks to divert attention away from him. Obviously it's a 4-day weekend for Thanksgiving, and this is when Cooper chose to do it, which is quite smart, because if he was a working man, he could leave his work, go to the airport, commit the robbery, and have extra time to get home to start work on Tuesday. Even if he hitchhiked a lot of the way, he could probably get quite far in a couple of days. He seems very proficient at planning, so he could even have had a car waiting for him around the area. Like, he gave the exact angles that needed to be used for the plane's flaps. It's very possible that he had a military background, especially in the parachuting sort of area. Guess where they teach that sort of stuff? In the Tacoma area. McCord Air Base, and he'd mentioned it on the plane. A lot of people believe he was an ex-paratrooper from the area, so that would make a lot of sense. And apparently he did show up once. Yeah, I actually remember this. He showed up in a prison, Fox River, that was it, helping Michael Scofield bust his wrongfully convicted brother Link out of the prison. But that was a TV show, and they didn't even know if it was him in the TV show. Good series though. Anyway, we don't know much. He could still be alive. He could have laundered the money. He could sip in Mai Tais in Panama. Or he could be impaled on a tree. Neck broken at the bottom of a Columbia River. There is one theory. This is my favourite one. The one I probably believe. In the area where he landed, we'll say. There's a volcano known as St. Helens, and in 1980 this volcano erupted right in the area where Cooper would have landed. This would have destroyed a lot of evidence, if any did exist. That's probably why they've never found anything on him. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. Subscribe. Also check out my urban exploring channel, Exploring with Icon Varga. Me and some friends go and explore abandoned buildings, factories, military bases and caves, stuff like that. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.